Okay. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is a meeting to discuss the Greenleaf Avenue, Greenleaf Ave and Lafayette Road sidewalks and intersection project. Next slide. I'm Mark Batchelor. I'm the design engineer for this project. With us tonight, and I'll start over here. We got Stephanie Secord, our City of Portsmouth
Public information. Driving the Zoom bus.
Yeah. Eric Eby, our transportation engineer. We have Tyler Reese, our associate engineer. Dave DeFosis, our construction manager. I'm gonna skip over you for just a second. Mike Maloney, police deputy chief. We got Peter Rice, the director of public works, and we've got Bill McQuillan, our fire chief, and Eric Fiedler, our city engineer in the back, and then all the way in the back is our city arborist, Max Waiter. So that's who we've got in.
We have Mary Lou McElwain from the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee.
Let's see here. So next slide. Okay, so this, go back. All right, so how did we get here? So this was a project that was resident requested and went through the council for approval for a sidewalk to connect the Hillside Drive neighborhood area to sidewalks, pretty much up to South Street. So with that, again, went to city council for funding approval. Funding got approved and available starting July 1st. In that time, we've then gone out, maybe you've seen them out there. We had surveyors out there, surveyed the entire section from South Street all the way down to the Route 1 bypass. And when we got that information back, we started creating concept plans to see what we could do with the available space within the city right away to install sidewalk connecting, as I said before. Now, in doing the analysis of creating concept plans, we have identified what I'm going to call areas of opportunity. There's areas that of conflict with having enough space in the right of way, but then there's also areas of opportunity for improving additional areas, maybe not necessarily directly related to the sidewalk, but could help deal with some of the other issues that have been brought up by the neighborhood, such as providing a safe pedestrian route between Hillside Drive and South Street, addressing the difficult turning movements at the Greenleaf and Lafayette intersection, traffic calming in the area, and maintaining access to the bypass for the neighborhood. Next slide. So our the big start of this is talking about putting in sidewalks. So typically the city standard is a concrete sidewalk that meets ADA requirements, and which is typically we hold a 5.5 foot minimum width. There are some areas where we may have to go down to 5 foot just for clearances because of right of way clearances. But generally speaking, these are our standards, and we typically are shooting for grass strips along the curb line. And the importance of the grass strips are for snow storage, pedestrian buffers, placements of utility poles, potential for adding trees and other plantings. Okay, so this slide shows our base design. We've broken up the project into two sections: our base design and our what I call optional or add alt section. So this base design includes new sidewalks from South Street all the way to the upper Hillside Drive intersection. What's important to note about this and all other discussions when we talk about this area right in here, which is currently those plastic removable bollards to try to keep people from going super fast down Greenleaf Ave. In all the scenarios that we're going to talk about for the proposed sidewalk, we are going to be putting curbing essentially along the white lines where the bollards are. So it will now become a green space instead of pavement that people can go through. This section also, it's important to note, we have gotten your responses that it is important to get this built as soon as possible. And this is the section we're focusing on to get done as soon as possible, starting in the spring. But this seems to be the focal point of getting access from the Hillside Drive neighborhood out to South Street. Next slide.
Sorry, every time I do this, it's a different move.
Okay, that was it. Back one. Okay, so this is the add alt optional section, which is between the two Hillside Drive intersections on Greenleaf. The reason why this is considered an add alt optional is because this is going to require extensive easements, extensive work on private property that we need to get agreements for and things like that. So again, we want to put this section in, but we don't want to delay the first base section, the first section first. So that's the priority, and if that lags, then it'll have to lag, but otherwise, you know, we're just going to treat it as a separate section. Next slide. Okay, so this is going to go into now what I referred to earlier as opportunities in this area. So we have a couple of options that we could do for the roadway alignment of this. Our option number one is essentially keep it exactly the same. Currently is 24 feet curb to curb. And has two-way traffic. So that's option number one, exactly the same, but the sidewalks on the side. Option number two is to create a one-way section on Greenleaf, which would be 18-foot wide. And what this would do is this would reduce traffic volumes down, up or down Greenleaf. Now, with the reduced volumes, it would be possible then to shrink the road from 24-foot wide down to 22. And what that does is I'll talk about a little more on other slides, but it will reduce the amount of private property infringements that we have and potentially reduce the amount of easements that are necessary and possibly expedite at least getting through some of these challenges that we're having. Again, traffic impacts of the one-way section will be discussed later in the presentation. Next slide. Okay, so how do the sidewalks get affected by each option? So again, I'm gonna go through option number one. Option number one is no changes, 24-foot wide, curb to curb, essentially the curb stays. Sidewalk from South Street to Upper Hillside Drive would need one easement on Greenleaf and one easement on Lafayette. Whereas the sidewalk between Upper Hillside Drive and Lower Hillside Drive would need two more easements and substantial impact on private properties. The other big impact for this scenario is we would have multiple trees that would have to be removed, and those trees would then have to go to Trees and Greenery for approval to be removed. Next slide. With roadway option number two, which is the one-way option, or a section of the road would be one way, and would reduce the other widths down to 22 feet. The sidewalk from South Street to Upper Hillside Drive, now that easement that's needed on Greenleaf goes away. We don't need that easement anymore. We would still need one on Lafayette. From the section between Upper and Lower Hillside Drive, we would still have the two additional easements, but there would be minor impacts on the private property in order to get those sidewalks in. And the other benefit is that would possibly reduce the tree removals down to zero on the entire project in this scenario. And again, all of that would have to go through Trees and Greenery. Next slide. All right, and now I'm going to pass this over to Eric Eby to discuss the survey results that you guys provided.
Thanks. All right, so we've been in touch with the neighborhood, and I know Greg had passed along that you had all a neighborhood meeting earlier this month, and out of that came some questionnaires and results from that, and we summarized them here in these bullets on the slide. So we saw that, you know, the majority of you would like the sidewalk to go all the way to that Lower Hillside Drive. You know, continue the sidewalk as far as possible down to that Lower Hillside Drive, as long as it wouldn't delay the project. And as we're talking about here, yeah, it may cause some delays. So we're keeping that in mind during the design. It's also, we know that you want to see traffic calming measures on Greenleaf. We've done some traffic counts and speed measurements out there. We've seen what the speeds are. We'll get to that in another slide. But, you know, traffic calming measures also, as long as it doesn't delay the sidewalk. The sidewalk's our primary goal in this project. But we'd also like to do traffic calming if possible. And we saw that the results of the survey, the people would most like to see would be improving that angle up at Lafayette and Greenleaf to make it an easier turn. And also a speed bump to keep the speeds on Greenleaf down. So those were the two top choices from the neighborhood anyways. The other items that we saw from the survey results is that you don't support the one-way traffic flow. You'd like to keep it two-way, you know, to both ends of the street. And, you know, there's trade-offs on both ways, you know, keeping it two-way, you don't get to narrow the street, but you do get your access on both ends. And you want less traffic and slower traffic on Greenleaf Ave. Normally that goes along with traffic calming, and we'll get into options of how to address that. And, you know, and one of the major points that we deal with is that police and fire like to have Greenleaf Ave as a direct route to the bypass. Coming down Lafayette from downtown, that's a very quick rate to get to the bypass and then to the hospital. So keeping that open for emergency purposes is key as well. So, next slide. So a little bit of history, those who have lived in the neighborhood know this well, but this is a slide from 2010, back when we had the partial interchange with Lafayette and the bypass. When you were coming down the bypass, you had no ability to turn left there to come up Lafayette. You were forced to use Greenleaf to come up, make that turn. Likewise, coming out of town on Lafayette, you couldn't make a right turn at that interchange. You had to come down Greenleaf in order to get on the bypass. When the bypass was originally built, that was the original thought, because the bypass just went around the city. It didn't connect anywhere else. But over the years, you know, there's been a lot more. The traffic circle was built, the Swallowing Turnpike, a lot more development. So this has become, Greenleaf was operating as the on-ramp to the regional highway system, carried a lot of traffic. So now with the changes that have happened recently, on the next slide, we can go to the next slide. Now that the state came in and put a signalized intersection in place of the overpass, and that allows all movements to and from Lafayette and the bypass to be made at that signal. So left turns no longer have to come up Greenleaf. Right turns coming down no longer have to come down Greenleaf. So that gives the ability to, bypass Greenleaf Ave, do some changes to Greenleaf to get some traffic off of there, calm it down. Likewise, the city put in a signal at the high school driveway several years back, and that's improved the traffic flow out here on Lafayette and gotten rid of a lot of the queuing that you see at school peak hours. And so it's much easier for traffic to come out left out of the high school and come down to the signal here and come up here if they had to. They no longer need to take a right and then a left here and cut down Greenleaf to get out to the bypass. So that brings us to the next slide. We've done some traffic studies out here. We counted Greenleaf Avenue earlier this month. We see about 2,400 vehicles a day on Greenleaf right now. Most of that, 2/3, is heading down the hill towards the bypass, very directional. And only, 1/3 going up the hill, because it's maybe part of the difficulty of making that left turn at the top of the hill. And we've also done counts at the Hillside Drive intersections to see where the residents are coming and going when you come in and out of Hillside. And we found that likewise, about 2/3 are heading to the bypass, coming out of Hillside Drive. And only about 1/3 are going up to Lafayette. So that helps to inform us of where the critical movements are out here. And we really want to keep that bypass access open for the neighborhood, because that's where most of the traffic is going. It's a convenience to get to Lafayette, but it's a necessity to get to the bypass. We've measured speeds out here as well. Without the bollards at the top of the hill, we're seeing average speeds of 29 miles an hour coming down the hill, with 85th percentile speeds of 33. That's, the winter time and when those bollards aren't in place at the top. When we put those flex posts in place up there, then we see the speeds drop by 2 miles an hour. They're on average and 85th percentile. And 85th percentile is mentioned because that's basically used to set speed limits. If we were to set the speed limit based on the 85th percentile, it would be posted at 30, which actually is the legal speed limit on Greenleaf Ave. It's posted at 20, and we try to keep people at 20, but they're doing closer to 30, and so it's speeds is an issue. You wouldn't like to see that kind of speed in the neighborhood. You'd rather have it at 20 miles an hour in a space in the neighborhood, especially without any sidewalks on the street. If you can go to the next slide. So over the past 10 years or so, we've taken a lot of several actions out here to try to address traffic calming on the street and traffic in the neighborhood. A big change, like I mentioned earlier, was the signal at the high school driveway to control traffic there, make it easier to get in and out of the high school without having to come up to Greenleaf. We put the bike lanes in on Lafayette. As part of those bike lanes, we put the bollards in, as you can see in that picture, the flex posts to help shorten up that crossing distance for bicycles. And it also makes it harder for vehicles to just use Greenleaf as a slip lane going down the hill. That's why you're seeing a 2-mile-an-hour reduction in traffic speeds when those bollards are in place. We've also put the feedback sign and pedestrian warning sign on Greenleaf to advise drivers that have their speed coming down the hill. It helps somewhat. We put the crosswalk across Lafayette along with the push button flashing lights. And we're seeing a lot of people using that. I mean, that's good to see. And we put the Weeble in the middle of the road. That really brings drivers' attention to the fact that there's people crossing the street here. More recently, we removed the tree at the corner of Hillside Drive and Greenleaf. That helped to improve the sight lines as you're coming out of the north leg of Hillside. We still have the curve in the road on Greenleaf, which limits sight lines, and we'll get to that, how we can address that. And we did change the city ordinance to prohibit trucks on Greenleaf Ave several years back. So the trucks now have to stay on Lafayette and go down to the bypass. They're not supposed to cut down Greenleaf. Next slide. So when we're looking at ways to make a section of Greenleaf Ave one way in order to skinny up the street and get a sidewalk in there with less impact, we first looked at the option of just closing off down at the bypass end, making that one way out to the bypass, not letting traffic come in up Greenleaf Ave. This would reduce the traffic by 35% on Greenleaf Ave because you wouldn't have that traffic coming in from the bypass. And it would give you both access to Lafayette at the top of the hill and getting out to the bypass at the bottom of the hill. So, but on the other hand, the drawbacks to this alternative is that you would only have a very short one-way section at the end of the road. And it would be very easy for vehicles to just cheat around that one-way restriction and ignore the one-way and come up to the rest of the street where Greenleaf is two-way. And in our initial talks with the DOT on this, because the bypass is a state roadway and they would have to approve a change, they were very hesitant to support this idea as well. They thought, yeah, you're going to have problems with traffic trying to cheat around the end of that. And this option also wouldn't address the top end of the hill, the turnout from Lafayette, from Greenleaf onto Lafayette. It would not help that. And you wouldn't have the direct access in from the bypass to the neighborhood, which we're seeing from our traffic counts is almost 2/3 of the traffic. The hillside is coming in and out from the bypass. Next slide. So that brought us to looking at the top end of Greenleaf for the one-way alternative. And what the benefits to this are more than the other one, because at this location, if you were to make it one way coming down the hill from Lafayette, you wouldn't have the ability to come up to Lafayette. You get rid of that left turn at the top of the hill, which is challenging, sight lines and speeds and just knowing when to make that turn. It would also allow us to narrow that upper section of Greenleaf, avoiding the tree removal in that area. It will allow us to move the traffic away from the inside of the curve coming down the hill and push it to the outside of the curve, which improves your sight lines as you're taking the turn out of Hillside Drive. You can see the traffic coming at a longer distance. And we'd also be able to put what's a traffic calming device there. If you can see in this picture here, what we call a chicane. It's sort of a zigzag. You're on this side of the road and then you shift over to here. That forces traffic to slow as they're coming through this area, approaching the Hillside Drive intersection. So that's a one way of slowing traffic without putting in speed bumps. Speed bumps are not desirable from traffic standpoint as far as maintenance, especially emergency vehicles. It's very rough on fire trucks and other emergency vehicles, ambulances who are trying to take patients to the hospital. And this would reduce the traffic, the 35% reduction, because you wouldn't have traffic coming up the hill from the bypass anymore. And you would have full access in and out from the bypass. The drawback to this alternative is that until the public learns that there's no more connection to Lafayette, they're still going to be making a left in from the bypass, coming up and saying, oh, I've come going one way. I guess I'll come around here and I'll hit the gas because I'm really mad now and I'll come around the neighborhood. So that would be a drawback, and what I would call it short-term pain, but long-term gain, because probably 6 months into it, people would know, they look at Google Maps and Waze and they say, okay, there is no connection. This doesn't make any sense to go this way. I did it once, I've learned they can't get through, so they'll stay on the bypass, go down to Lafayette and take their left at the signal. And, you know, during that trial period or that time when people are getting used to it, there are things we could do for the neighborhood. We have temporary speed bumps that we use on Woodbury. They could be put on Hillside Drive to, you know, keep down the speeds as they're coming through. And, you know, and if we are to divert those left turns down to Lafayette, we still would need to work with the DOT on that. We looked at this several years ago when we first floated this idea, and we've looked at these intersections. They can't handle that traffic. We definitely look at that again to make sure traffic volumes haven't changed dramatically. But we feel that we could divert those left turns who would coming up Greenleaf today, bring them down to the signal without a problem. So that's the that other second lane. You can go to the next step. So there's concerns about losing that access. If we to make this one way, then you don't have the left turn at the top of the hill onto Greenleaf. And, you know, it's less convenient, but, you know, going out to the bypass and then coming down, making a left here and a left here and then coming, oh, I did it. There we go. So we looked at this. This is according to Google Maps under average traffic conditions. If you're coming out of Hillside Drive and going up to the intersection with South Street, it would normally take about 2 minutes. If you had to go around the block, it would take 3 minutes. So it's adding an extra minute to your time. But it's a safer condition, a more positive condition, because you're making a left to the signal rather than trying to choose a gap in traffic up at the top of Greenleaf onto Lafayette. And the next slide shows if you're going downtown from Hillside, you're coming up on under current conditions, you take that left to the top of the hill and go up Middle Street into downtown. It takes you about 5 minutes under average conditions to get up to the intersection of Congress and Islington up there. Whereas if you made that one way, you do have now the option, you could either come down to Lafayette like on the previous slide, or you do have the option now, we have the Hodgson Way coming through the West End Yards. You can come up the bypass, there's a free right turn lane here, make the right turn, go up through here onto Kate and Bartlett, then onto Islington and get downtown. And that's a 6-minute drive compared to 5 minutes the other way. So, you know, there are options to the neighborhood if that one-way section went into effect where you can't make the left from Greenleaf onto Lafayette. And you also would have, you know, under better conditions, you can go through the traffic circle and go up the bypass and in Maplewood or Market Street to get downtown as well. But under peak conditions, nobody wants to do that. So, and usually, you know, you can stay in the right lane and get, you know, onto Hodgson Way. It's usually the left lane that backs up the worst trying to get into the circle. So there are other options. I mean, I just want to present that, you know, if you're cut off from getting a left turn onto Lafayette, there are options now because of the signal down there at the bypass in Lafayette, as well as the new Hodgson Way. So there are alternatives that didn't used to exist. Next slide. So those are the options. And so we're looking for your feedback tonight, and Mark can talk more about the design.
Yep.
Process from there.
So if we start moving forward on like the tree removals, like I said before, we'll have to go through Trees and Greenery, which we'd be looking at the September 11th meeting for that. I have put out some drawings on the back. It's important to note that we're currently in the concept phase. So everything that's in the back is a concept. There's nothing written in stone. We're going to be transitioning into actual preliminary design phase and then finalized design. So the intent is to get the design done we're getting close to fall already, this fall and early winter, so that we can go out to bid, you know, maybe late December, early, you know, January, February, and construction starting in the spring. So that's currently the plan. Again, depending on the construction phase, depending on you know, the issues that we may come up with easements and stuff like that, will help determine, you know, if we're going all in on the full section or having to segment it. But we'll know that more as we get through the finalized design phase. Other than that, next slide. We're open for questions and comments.
When you were talking about making the road not as wide, and you said that to do that, we'd have to reduce down to one-way traffic. Is there any way to make the road not as wide, but maintain two-way traffic? with the idea of slowing the traffic down?
Currently, I don't think, because of the volumes,
Okay.
it's not advisable to go any narrower than 24 feet
Okay.
with two-way traffic.
We already narrowed the road back in 2004 when we built the sidewalk that's on the other side of the street.
Okay,
So the road used to be wider, we already narrowed it.
okay, cool, thank you.
You could still use speed bumps though, correct, to slow the traffic down with two-way traffic?
No, that's not a desirable option. This is an emergency route for fire and police. And you do not want to have those, they did not work well on Woodbury Ave. We're not recommending that here. That's why we're recommending the chicane, what we call the shift in the lateral shift in the road. That has the ability to slow traffic down without causing a large disturbance for emergency vehicles.
Two words, Chad, landscaping, trails, you're gonna hear them all day.
Yeah.
Really more of a comment. So if you did make it one way going down Greenleaf, so just as an example, Market Basket, I'm sure everybody goes to Market Basket often. That what I usually do is come up Greenleaf and cross the bypass and then get home to Hillside. It would force us to go up and then take a left turn coming down Greenleaf, and that's very difficult. It's hard to take a left turn because of hairpin.
Well,
But that was the first option.
Yeah.
So, with so we showed two options, one with the one-way up the top of the hill, one with a one-way at the bottom at, Route 1 bypass. Our preferred, I think, that we've discussed that has the most pros versus cons is having the one-way section be up at the top and the one-way coming down to the bypass. So in your scenario, you'd still be able to make that left-hand turn from the bypass onto Greenleaf and come right into your neighborhood.
yeah, the one-way section would just be from Lafayette to that first leg of Hillside Drive. The rest of Greenleaf would remain two-way traffic.
Yep.
From the bypass to the.
Couple of concerns that I have about making it one way is that, I know you say you're estimating it's only 6 months until drivers figure it out, but I don't know if that's true. But if even within those 6 months, people will be cutting through Hillside Drive, probably at speeds, and that's where all the children are playing all the time on the streets. So bringing that traffic through there, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, is really not desirable for, I'm sure, families with children. The other thing is, I think it's the idea of not making it accessible to downtown and showing these alternate routes. You say it's just an extra minute here, an extra minute there, but I think it's more than just time. It's this feeling that you can't just get out from your neighborhood and get to South Street, the high school, all the places that I'm sure many people visit going downtown. So to me, it's also kind of a real drawback to being in the neighborhood if you can't just, get to those places that are in the downtown area without having to manage additional traffic and highway travel. So I feel concerned about the one-way, even though I understand that it slows traffic. I also, as a driver, feel like getting out of Greenleaf onto Lafayette, while a little tricky, isn't that tricky. And to me, I wouldn't want to lose the two-way experience. I think it adds value to the neighborhood, actually.
If I can just add to what Joni is saying, something that's on my mind is also property values. That Portsmouth is a very desirable place to live, and the access to downtown certainly drives property values. While a minute here and there, I agree that I don't know that it's just about time with the travel.
Yeah, and also, lowering speeds could be argued that would increase property values, with traffic calming in a neighborhood.
Absolutely, yeah.
So question, you brought up I've already forgotten the word, I'm gonna call it the zigzag, which I think you relabeled it. Makes me also think of something I know in the neighborhood was the angle of the intersection at the top of Lafayette. Not a civil engineer, so I don't know if there's room to make that more of a perpendicular approach to Lafayette from Greenleaf. But when I think of the zigzag as the effect of slowing traffic down, and are we effectively, are we creating that same opportunity if that curve, instead of where it is with the bollards, becomes and aids in a more perpendicular intersection there? Because like anybody driving, you have to make more of a 90-degree turn to get onto a street. You have to almost stop to make that turn.
Yeah.
Is that an option? Is there room for a re-angling of the street at the top?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is not much property. I don't know if we have a slide that shows property lines on
I
there.
don't know.
There isn't much more room to slide it, maybe a couple of feet, that's it, but the other problem is that as you slide the intersection to more of a 90-degree, you're coming down the hill and you're worsening your sight lines. You're losing your ability to see over the top of the crest of the hill on Lafayette to see what traffic is coming at you. If you could tee it off, ideally you would want to push it up the hill farther to tee it off, but that you have less room up there as well.
I don't really disagree with you as a user of the intersection frequently. I would say the most challenging part of that is the look back, rather than being able to assess the drivers coming down the hill. Because if you're, it's just that much more angle looking back, whether your vehicle has good silence, whatever it may be. But if you're turned here, yes, you're right, it's downhill, so you still have the downhill traffic, but you have a much clearer look to your right and a faster look to your right to get out there. So I would be interested in knowing if that is a possibility to.
Not under the current, it would require land takings because there is no more property there to straighten out that end of the roadway. That property comes right up to a point right at that intersection, so there is no more room there without doing easements or takings.
Okay.
So we have to do a taking, we might also have to lower Lafayette Road so you could see, which would be a major expensive deal.
Could you put the map up again that shows the one way at the top? And my question is, right now, we bike, and there's a lot of people that bike in the neighborhood, and that's the way we go to downtown. How would bicyclists be going to downtown that way? We would have to go up to the bypass, around, on two lights.
That's it.
If you had that one way going out, coming out of Hillside,
We could look at that, we could actually do a multi-use path for that one-way section.
Yeah.
So that you could- Instead of building a sidewalk there, we could build it as a multi-use path a little wider.
Can you say that again, instead of a sidewalk, what?
For that one-way section,
Yeah,
from the top, from the upper side of Hillside to Lafayette Road. Instead of building a 5.5-foot sidewalk, we could build it as a 10-foot wide multi-use path, so that pedestrians, bicycles could go.
That's great.
So that's one way to do it. And we would look at things like that, depending on, we didn't look at that so far because we want to kind of judge where you guys were at. But we could definitely make a design like that, if that's what we.
Although if you're coming up on a bike, for state law, you can't ride on sidewalks, you should shift cross over Lafayette, then when you come to the top, which is not gonna be.
But that's what they're doing now.
so right now we just cross the way you.
It's really no
Light
different.
up.
Yeah, you can use the flashing light right now to cross.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have to think about that.
I just want to touch on the perpendicular question. As someone, an observer of that intersection, and Chad can attest to this as well. There are near misses every hour. If you sit there and watch for any length of time, you see a near miss, but they're able to miss it because they're at that angle. If they were coming out at an angle, it wouldn't be a near miss, so.
Right.
Just like you said, you have to lower the sight line or something. It's definitely creating an accident rate.
I want to go on the record saying that I kind of think that the one way at the top of Hillside, the upper Hillside, would be beneficial for reducing traffic flow and reducing the speed of the cars coming in through our area. I do understand that we have a lot of kids in the road and we have to put a lot of bumps to make sure that, our kids are safe while this transition is going on. But I also would like to take off the table option 1 of the traffic flow. Because
I don't think anybody likes that,
No.
you know, so just take it off and we don't have to discuss it. But, you know, this is our only option of modifying the traffic flow, and I think that intersection is very bad, and I go down and around all the time, so. Doesn't make any difference to me.
In the back?
Yeah, I was just also thinking, if you end up going, not doing the one way, and I am somewhat in favor of the one way, like at the top, except for the cars going down hillside, because I mean, I think it was 2004 when we had part of Greenleaf shut down and people were going around hillside really fast, like you said, they're gonna go really fast. And I would not want to do that now because there's a lot of kids, a lot of animals. It's really dangerous to do that. So unless you can come up with an alternative to that, I don't know how feasible that would be, although I am totally for it. The other one is that those bollards that you have up there, if there's not going to be a change to the intersection that's substantial, they drive everybody into the other lane. So I could sit there with a camera and almost every single car coming down that is on the wrong side of the road when they come down. And so that doesn't seem safe either. So I'm hoping there'll be some additional changes.
And I will say also, by thinking about constructability of this project with the sidewalks, you know, in any scenario, whether or not we're gonna keep it two ways, one way. In order to put sidewalks there on that side, for the construction portion of the work, we're gonna have to have that section as a one-way. Because there's no way we're gonna be able to keep two-way traffic going at that intersection and have an excavator in the road to build the sidewalk and things like that. So we're gonna be able to see that opportunity during the construction process about how we're gonna have to handle those traffic flows as well, and how people are gonna handle them, knowing that they're not gonna have necessarily access, at least while we're building the sidewalk in this area over here. So that's just a heads up that construction will add its own complexity to the process here, so.
I'm looking at your bottom red line there, and you're blocking off two driveways. My driveway on at 3 Hillside and the driveway across the street. How are you, what would be the idea for making sure that they have access?
So these two driveways would have to do the one way to go out.
How would they get in their driveway?
So that this property here would have to come in on this side. That is a draw.
And I would have to do the same thing if I came into mine. Because I do use my garage. I have a little red car sitting in my garage. It comes in and out that driveway.
That's a good point.
And you're blocking both of us off from
Yes.
easy access.
Yeah, you'd still be able to make the left from Lafayette onto.
Well, I usually come in, I go out to the bypass and I usually come back from the bypass, so I'm making the left into my driveway.
Yeah.
You got me blocked off.
Well, adjust the chicane so it's not, can you
Yeah.
slide it up towards Lafayette more and just compress the,
We can look at just keeping it in this section here.
yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, this was a very rough block diagram just for the slide. I mean, it's not a design.
Right, I just wanna talk through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I was making a point. This is still concept. It's still,
Get it?
yeah.
Those concerns can be addressed.
Yeah.
I mean, assuming your driveway could be accessed the way you'd like, would this be an alternative that would be interesting to you?
I don't have a problem, I'm coming down. We're not going up. I don't use it, we don't use it, but 3 or 4, maybe 5 times a week, we go up to Lafayette Road and make the left and come to downtown.
I think one of the reasons why we tried to shift this further down was that if you do get the person that comes in off and they think that they can get up here, and now they've come up this far, they're gonna turn around in your driveway. Instead of, the further down it goes, you know, we can put as many signs as we want to here that says, you know.
Turn around.
dead end.
Hillside anyway.
That would be better than having to go around hillside.
They turn around in our driveway.
I have a question for the neighbors. How do the high school students get to the high school now? Do they come up Greenleaf and cross at the new intersection, RP there, or do they come through that path and cross at Andrew Jarvis? What do the high school kids do right now?
Two high schoolers and they trespass through those two properties on Greenleaf and cut through
Yeah,
to the high school, which brings them out to the bypass at the light. Or excuse me, to Lafayette.
Oh, down there.
Andrew Drive, Jarvis Drive, bring them to Andrew Jarvis, to the light at Andrew Drive.
Right in front of the entrance there to the high school.
So they cross hillside at either end to get to the sidewalk and walk over and use the cut through.
And there's also several students who come up across the bypass from Lower Greenleaf on the other side of the bypass, and they come up and use that same cutting as well.
My senior mentioned there's probably 25 to 30 students that use the cut through daily that are crossing through there was her guesstimate.
So it's not really, you said it's not a city-owned right of way, it's just a path that someone has let them use.
So that could be,
Two property owners.
Well,
So-
that's what I'm thinking, it could close anytime.
so that could be cut off the same way as the ABC building cuts off.
Right.
Absolutely.
I just want to say one more thing, like in my experience and experience of my kids who both walk to the high school and bike and walk now to the middle school. The speed feels to me the most dangerous when it's coming from Upper Lafayette down Greenleaf to the bypass. Whereas when people speed or even drive appropriately up from the bypass, you really have a lot of time to see them. Whether the tree is tucked down or not, it's that curve, right? So my concern is when making it one way, I know, obviously, you know, it'll slow down traffic by eliminating the two-way traffic, but I still feel like it's an issue. Coming down that curve, whether you're taking, left or right, it's still, the sightline isn't great. I don't know, I just feel, I'm really concerned. I want to get on record that cutting off Hillside Drive from accessing not just downtown, but all the other side streets that come before downtown, to me feels like kind of a big deal. And I think, there are a lot of people who use those areas, and to go around just feels like it's making our neighborhood feel more isolated.
I agree.
About that. Even though, of course, I want the traffic to slow down.
I just want to totally support that last comment. And it supports what I believe was originally one of the key issues, which is the speed with which cars are driving down. And I still think that the only way to slow it down is not necessarily narrowing the road. That would work, I think, to a limited extent. But what would work, to my way of thinking, are the speed bumps that nobody wants to talk about. That's the only way that traffic is really almost guaranteed to slow down. I don't want to hear about ambulances or police cars or fire engine. The speed bump will slow the traffic. I don't think anything else will do that as effectively.
Phil McClellan, Fire Chief. So I've said this at traffic safety meetings. I said it at city council meetings. You can hear me say it now. No, any more speed humps in traffic lanes in the city. We use this. We have the ability to veto it through the code, and that's what we'll do. So that's why that has been taken off the table. I'm the bad guy in the room. I'm sorry to tell you.
So why don't we remove the speed bumps from all of Portsmouth?
I'm with you.
That's my position. What's the answer? If some people can have it, why can't we have it?
Right, well, I can't speak for the sins of the past, right, before I was in charge. I'm in charge now, that's my position, right?
If you made it a sharper left as you're coming down the hill, they'd have to slow down to make it a left. You know what I mean? So that would, they'd have to slow down. So if it came out more of a right angle, to Lafayette, they'd have to slow down.
Yeah, so, and that just says doing a one-way on the top would also allow us, because right now we're, the two-way scenario is we're gonna follow with curb line where the little plastic bollards are now. If it's one way, we would have an opportunity to maybe tighten that up, but again, we have to check that out with turning radiuses for emergency vehicles and things like that, because we don't wanna tighten that up too much that it's a problem, but yeah, we have a little bit more.
It doesn't affect me because I'm in town of that, but I can understand a lot of people, you know, have concerns their access to downtown would be, you know, kind of limited now that have to go all the way around.
A nice sidewalk.
So I'd say two things. First is, when we're talking about reducing speed, but you talked about narrowing, you know, I think, I first want to say, I think this all stems from the sidewalk project, and I'd like to get back to the sidewalk after this one, if that's works out, but, you've talked about 2 lanes being 24 feet wide, and then saying if we went one way, we'd be able to go to 22 feet wide. So.
In the two-way section.
In the two-way section, okay, how wide would it be in the one-way section?
18.
18 feet, so instead of having a 12-foot section, which being narrow slows people down, you've increased the width of the one-way, making people, I think, will go faster.
Well,
And even with the zigzag, you have to have enough room, I'm sure, to get a fire truck through. Now people have a wider lane to go faster with no opposition coming to slow them down.
the intent on that was to facilitate the 18-foot in the chicane and the area where we start getting into and out of the one-way. That's why we can look at different widths.
You have a wide, now you're creating a wider lane with no opposition, and everything we've learned about this is that narrow slows people down. So in getting back to the narrow for the sidewalk up there and looking at, I know we're talking about the intersection because we're on the sidewalk project, and so if we look at the section, the part 1 of the sidewalk installation and say, and you're saying that there's a couple of easements that may change from that. I guess if from a city perspective, in looking to change or improve this intersection, like I said, there's opportunities here. For the upper part of that sidewalk, what is the dramatic impact? You showed us the easements, you know, there's, I think if I remember correctly, there's 1 and 1. And then 2 and 2 for, you know, whether upper or lower for the sidewalk. But does any of this, or is this, as part of this, something that can still change later? Even if we put the sidewalk in now, because we know that, you know, you saw our responses, most of us want 2-lane access going here. But our number one thing, the reason I think all of us end up sitting up here is because we don't have a sidewalk in town. We can't walk and ride our bikes and push strollers into town. And so I think for us, that's the number one thing.
Right.
And so I'm very interested in what happens with the intersection. I want to have something that's safe for residents, or, you know, there's a lot of people visit the town. But I think right now, I'd like to learn most about phase 1, what's real timeline for easements? Like what does that look like? And what makes the bottom 2 more difficult than the top 2? So we can understand, like your proposal there to say, this can happen, you know, top can happen, and whatever my labels here, and then bottom you take longer.
So, yeah, so we're just starting now to speak with the residents for potential easements are going to be necessary. I met with people at Three Hillside the other day about it, and that's one that's this property right here that we are going to need easements on. And unfortunately, it's not just one simple easement based off of the geometry of their property lines, but it's 3 separate little itty bitty easements.
I do little things.
And these easements I'm talking about are like 6 inches, right? So in the scenario that the reason why we were bringing up the option of the one-way and potentially narrowing it down to 22 feet, because then I can move this one pesky utility pole 6 inches and I wouldn't need any easements from these fine people. So that's, like I said, when we start going to the concept phase and I'm looking at this and being like, man, in order to get in like the bare minimum sidewalk width, this is what I'm looking at for easements, but if we could just tweak one little thing here and there, it would be different. So that's why we wanted to have that conversation that brought in potentially narrowing, potentially other
So Mark,
things.
I think the thrust of the question was if we, you know, what would it take to get those easements, the time frame? It would pretty much be consistent with what we're doing for the design and construction. So by you know, January, we would have the easement secured, we'd have a memorandum of agreement ahead of time, and you can final easements at the end, or you can get easements done, but it would be part of the design effort.
And the other reason is the ABC buildings. Right? Because the sidewalk that's there is on their property.
They great work.
Right, I get that right?
Yeah, so they're the
Once
easement
we go to-
on the Lafayette side, which
That shouldn't be an issue. I mean, I understand that, but we're not gonna be using that sidewalk. You know, so that sidewalk's been used and they've expressed that they'd be willing to participate and get that done.
Can I
So
just say
understand
though, that
frustration
the path through ABC had been used for over 30 years and we wouldn't have to have this conversation
Over
if
50,
we
over
could
50.
still walk through, so just that's why we're kind of a little bit.
Sure, I lived there for over 30 years, so I used that area for over 30 years and I agree.
50, sorry,
Great,
50.
we've gone down that road, it's private property, it's their right to be able to say no. So we're cutting, you know, you guys have lobbied hard, made sure that this is moving forward, we're moving forward with this. And your question was a good question, sir, is in terms of, you know, don't slow this down, keep it moving, and we plan on doing it.
And does that mean, I'm sorry, for the lower section of the sidewalk, would that also fall on this timeline of a January
So
time?
I can show you, we don't have a slide here, I've got a drawing in the back that shows the extensiveness of what would be necessary for those two other parcels that are between the two hillside drives. And so I can speak to you afterwards about the.
But even if that was decided that we had secured, we may not have the funds to cover all that work. So the way we structure this is to be able to break it up into two pieces if need be. And so we would come back and ask for more money, and we do the balance of it once we have the funds.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can get it all done at one time, that'd be great, but you need to plan accordingly just in case.
But basically, it's residential, it's moving the stone wall, it's more impact to landscaping. That type of thing, which is why it's a little more difficult than the two that we just moved.
The one-way section at the top. You're gonna move out the road, the sidewalk to take the ball in area. That's gonna slow down some traffic. The rest of that section, when the sewer has to be done, which is gonna have to be done at some point in time. You gotta come down Greenleaf and replace that sewer line. And you just fix the road there.
Yeah, there's a section of sewer line on that.
That's the worst section in town, from what I understood. No. It's not.
I've seen it. I'm telling them more this week.
So there's a bad section.
The section, I mean, I have 90 foot of sewer pipe going from my house halfway down Greenleaf, which is, we know is a disaster. That whole section up there is.
You're not wrong. There is a section in Zupa, but it's small sewer and relatively easy to get some of the local things 30%.
So, but if we wanted to talk about making that one lane, isn't that the section that we come to one lane?
The bad section is between the two hillsides. The upper section isn't as bad. I just looked at it like a week or so ago.
Okay.
We have to do some more inspections there, but it's that section between hillside.
So the other part of your question was one of the impacts, so that if we do the road work separately and build a sidewalk first, then the trees that we have to cut are cut and they're not coming down. That's really the other. And that was the other part of the question you asked.
Yes, okay.
In the back.
Yes, hi, I really like the concept. One of the questions I have is that, you know, making it either a left or a right turn out of the hillside at the upper end is extremely hazardous because you don't have enough sight line, you can't see the cars flying down that hill. Would it be possible to put a stop sign at the end of the one lane?
People would just ignore it most of the time.
I don't think they would ignore it if you put a cop there once in a while.
When you come to a stop sign, you see no reason to stop because there's no traffic coming out of the side street. People will just say, oh yeah, I'm just.
But it will slow them down.
It'll slow them down. A yield sign would do that. I mean, but,
Well, a stop sign would be better.
yeah, stop signs are,
Second question I have.
stop sign's not appropriate, but go ahead.
The second question I have is, if you go through with this, I was assuming there'd have to be some significant signage on the bypass to alert the, people of this change.
Yes.
And I'm hoping DOT doesn't have an issue with that type of signage.
No.
No, probably not, but Dennis, there's one thing I found out, one day, when I hit the bridge, people don't know how to read. Like 4 message boards and they got mad at me. Interesting.
Just back to the trees for a moment, of trees that would have to come down the sidewalk. Would someone from the town have a conversation with the homeowners impacted by those trees? Or do we just stick a sign on the tree?
As we said in the press, we're gonna have, it's gonna go to Trees and Greenery. In which case, the homeowners would be notified and they can come out and.
So the notification is the posting on the
Yes.
tree.
Yes.
It's not an individual knock on the door type of notification.
Right.
And mark are the trees in the city
Why
like.
can't there be a conversation with the homeowner?
There can be, but it's,
But
we're
it
having
is-
a conversation right now. If there's a tree that it's gonna get posted. And if you know, you'll have the opportunity to have that conversation. It's
Why
a city.
can't someone notify them? that
We
the
are
town
notifying
has
you right now.
planned To cut down their trees.
I don't believe it's their tree, I believe they're city trees.
The city-
We wouldn't cut down your tree,
All right, the city tree.
it's city tree. Yeah,
Sounds kind of callous to me.
well,
That's why we're presenting these options. We can avoid cutting trees.
we're
if we do this.
providing potential options to avoid that.
Wasn't this, didn't this option limit the amount of trees that came down?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, this option here would limit.
So I just have a question for Eric. We had emailed a little bit, Lisa Aviar. And you had mentioned the state is not interested in having Greenleaf be a one-way towards the bypass in that email. So I'm just now confused why the city's looking at that as an alternative. Can you speak more to what the conflict is between the state and their goals and the city's goals and how those collide?
Yeah, when I say the state's not supportive of it, they were not supportive of that alternative one, which was just the lower end of Greenleaf being one way. They would not want to see happen because they know that it really wouldn't be very effective. People would go the wrong way just to skirt around that 100-foot closure, the one-way section.
Okay.
So, but the rest of it, if we wanted to make it one way the entire way, or I mean, or just a one-way section up there, they're willing to work with us. That's not a problem.
That's fine.
They
to
just,
work with
yeah,
the state.
yeah, they just need to see that any left turns that are currently coming off the bypass and coming up Greenleaf, that they could be accommodated at the next signal on the bypass. So, and we would
Thank you.
work with them on the signage and whatever's needed to get that message.
I live on Upper Hillside, and since that tree came down, personally, I think the sight line is much, much improved to take that left. So now my question is, once I go up Greenleaf, I want to take a left onto Lafayette. Can anything be done with the stoplights to maybe put some gaps in there so people could get out easily? I mean, and maybe there's one on South Street, there's one way you can take a right turn onto Lafayette. Could that be eliminated? Is it, it's okay to take a right and just make people stop?
The right on red.
Right on red, because I think that would really make it much easier to get out and we would still have our ability to go downtown, to drive downtown easily.
It's something we can look at, but the spacing of the signals is far enough apart that I don't think you'd get a lot of benefit. The signal at the high school stays green all the time on Lafayette, except when someone's coming out of the high school. So you'd really have to be turning it red for no reason on Lafayette occasionally to do that type of coordination that you're talking about. It's kind of, you're hurting other places to try to benefit a small benefit there. I mean, the reason we have signals that now at the bypass in Lafayette is so that you can use those other ways around and not have to try to come out of Greenleaf. I mean, it does provide some gaps, but yeah, in order to get those gaps, that synchronization of signals that you're talking about, you would really have to degrade the performance at these other intersections to get them to work together. at South and Lafayette, you know, you always have some traffic coming down Lafayette, whether it's turning out of South Street or it's coming down Lafayette itself. It's almost always a constant flow coming down from that direction. You know, even if you were to restrict the right turn on red, you still have the southbound flow on Lafayette when that's green, or southbound, you know, south is turning on to Lafayette. And in the distance with the ABC buildings in the middle and the other driveways, it's not likely that you would get a lot of benefit from doing that with the signals. And you'd have to really impact the signal at the high school, stopping that traffic there for no reason, you know, to get that to work.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I would really hate to lose the ability to go downtown.
Well,
I agree.
yeah, you can still come around.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not being cut off completely. You go around the block, so.
I'm also in favor of keeping it two-way at the top. I'm curious on the fire and the police, what do they feel about the zigzag? No on the speed bump, what about the zigzag? How does it impact the emergency vehicles?
So, the zigzag, we can work with, right, I mean, it's not ideal. But, yeah, no, like, but again, right, these are quality of life issues, I'm not, you know, sympathetic, I'm empathetic, I live here in town, I understand, right? So we have to find a way to make it all work. You know, part of our challenge here is, you know, where do we give up here and what do we gain over here? So
What's your
the,
preference on the zigzag?
look, if the zigzag works for me, we can make it work, we can live with it,
Just curious.
yeah. You can leave it open, it works for me, right?
Another question, comment I've asked Andrew about it, but you and I agree that the turning left on the north side is much easier than the north part of the side, but I was also wondering, I noticed you put the data gathering on that telephone pole across the street. Would be the possibility of putting a mirror there to give a nice angle to see traffic coming down?
Well, traffic mirrors are not an official traffic control device. The
I'm just
city,
saying that-
the city does not install them for liability reasons, we can't. But when residents put their own mirrors up, would you like to do that? You could. We don't put them up and we don't encourage them, but you know, people use them. Because it's hard to judge how far a car is in those, and if they get out of alignment or something, you know, you never know, you can't trust them. So the city is not using, they're not a federally approved device, we have to follow federal guidelines on traffic control devices.
Running around in certain areas, I've seen signs that said, you know, limit traffic to local traffic only. Is there a possibility to put that at the top there? I mean, it's not gonna stop all traffic, but eventually people will learn and not go.
Yeah, it's.
And when I see a sign like that, I know it's a cut through.
Yes.
Honestly.
People say, I live in Portsmouth, I'm local.
Sorry?
I live in Portsmouth, I'm local.
I'll see one sign that it's not been put back since that sidewalk was done in '04, did you say?
I think it was so far, yeah. Long time ago.
Yeah, there's a speed limit sign on your right as you're coming down Greenleaf. It's, I think, right at 20 miles. There used to be a blind drive sign below it, mounted there. It never went back up, just before your driveway. It just isn't up anymore. And that's works typically.
Well, the driveway is visible. I mean, you might not be able to see the curb. If there was someone pulling out, you would be able to see his car if he was trying to pull out his driveway. A blind driveway means you can't see the car until it's too late, but you do have enough sight lines coming around that curve. That's why, you know, pulling the traffic one way, the opposite side of the street would increase that sight line, because you're coming out of the inside of the curve, you're increasing your sight line around the outside.
It increases the sight line, but it keeps, the sight line is also really critical when you're taking a left to go downtown, not when you're taking a right to get on the bypass. So it might increase visibility, but you don't necessarily need it as much. And I have a question. So the majority of people in the neighborhood are requesting to keep it two-way. So why?
Can I just, where did you get the majority from?
Because that's what you.
Survey
results.
Survey.
But when we had the survey
Can I-
results, we didn't have this specific, I just don't want you to speak for everyone.
Oh, no, I'm not. I was going based on what he said.
Okay,
The numbers.
Okay, cool.
indicated. So obviously a lot of people don't agree with that, but based on what you said, most people wanted to keep it two-way. So I'm just wondering, what is other than slowing down the traffic down Greenleaf, is is it gonna delay getting a sidewalk if, because of the easements? Is that part of the interest in making it one way?
No, I don't.
I'm
Oh,
just
sorry,
kidding.
sorry, no, I didn't, it's not gonna delay the sidewalk, we're moving forward on, you know. What's there, we're gonna go, we just looked at these as opportunities that if. These scenarios would help out, the design process, but it's not gonna be a delay. To just look at these opportunities and see if there's something possible there, we're gonna continue on, it's just that, again, like Dave said, in a scenario like this.
Yeah.
You can't come back and put in 3 or 4 40-year-old trees after we've cut them down. So that's kind of those are the kinds of things, we're looking at things that we just can't walk back from and do later down the line. But again, if we get, you know, whatever's decided on the 2-way versus 1-way, we're gonna be moving forward to get these in the spring. It's not gonna hold us up.
Can we, as a community, experience what it's like to have a sidewalk there? And then let you know, like, can we have an input on whether we want to move forward with a 1-way or not? Is that something that's possible? Can we see what it's like to see the sidewalk?
I think that's something that's possible, just realize those 4 trees are gonna be gone and we can't get them back.
Right.
But those, so,
I'm
if you then later down the road say, yeah, we wanna go with a 1-way,
Yeah.
then just realize that a lot of the talking points that we're talking about now
I understand.
are not.
But the risk though is on the funding side of things, right? You definitely will get a sidewalk up the hillside, but that between the 2 hillsides, there's that the stone walls, the trees, the grading, all the other stuff that goes into private property too. There's the risk is on the cost side of things. We put budget for it, but that's more than we anticipated doing. So the risk is potentially that when you bid it out, prices have come up quite a bit in the past couple of years, like. That might be because it becomes so expensive because of decisions made that maybe that intermediate segment has to be, you know, additional funding requests like that. So potentially there would be a delay. You still get a sidewalk to one aspect of the neighborhood. It's just a matter of the timing of that in between sidewalks. So that's the consideration.
Right, got it, thank you.
Just a comment on the 1-way. Something that hasn't been brought up. 8 Greenleaf, 344, 322, 302, and 304 would greatly benefit from a noise reduction, because when people hit the gas to not get in a collision, it sounds like the green light just hit it and went the dragon. That's what, so it would be noise calming is a plus if you're looking to put road signs.
How does it, with all the discussion, everyone's making great points, but how does it get decided? Like, is it a vote? Does every house that's affected by it get a vote? Or like, how is it decided?
Ultimately, it's our decision.
Okay.
What, we don't ignore resident input.
Sure.
So we're not gonna pursue, going 1-way, because there does not appear to be consensus at this point. We'll also go to the Parking Traffic and Safety Committee, for their input. But at the end of the day, you know, the lane configuration and traffic, you know, is really a purview of this, city staff.
Sure.
But, you know, we work closely with the police and fire, to make sure their needs are met. But, you know, the whole intent of this meeting was really to understand your appetite for doing this. We've been looking at this intersection I've been looking at it for 22 years. Yeah, and, you know, we put in the high school light specifically to be able to do something with this intersection.
Yeah.
And so really that was the impetus, that was the starting point, and we've been wrestling with it ever since, because nobody wants to lose the convenience going downtown. However, everybody acknowledges that it's a really dangerous intersection.
Can I just add it to the discussion as well, is that I do in fact support that, because the 1 minute of me having to drive around is less of an inconvenience of my kids getting hit by a car. And there's been a numerous occasions where I've had to run across that street, and I would rather take 1 more minute of going round. But I would want to keep the bike path that you suggested, because a lot of us do bike out of the neighborhood. So I just wanted that to be recorded too, please.
What would be the process for, I totally agree with Greg, know, when I go up to that, I take a lot of left turns out of there downtown. I just go as far as I can to make it as close as I can to a 90. What would be the process? Would that be another easement to try to cut that triangle that's nearly, I think there's a pole there and that's about it. Would that be another process to, and I understand it's lower.
It's a separate process, so we would look at identifying that as a separate easement for taking that we have to do.
It's like having that,
We would also-
that's
Well, that's
something to look into.
That's assuming we don't get a voluntary easement,
Right, yeah, either way,
either, yeah.
we have to fire them.
But like Eric said, though, you're going further down the hill too, so it does impact sightlines as well. So you're straightening it out, but then you're also.
But then you're just constant, I disagree with Greg, I agree with Greg, that's the issue, is not being at the 90. Cause I'm
At
fine.
the 90, I'm gonna hear screeching brakes more than I'm gonna hear the engine guns to get it done.
It is a better visibility when you turn right and look down the hill, but the sight distance is the concerns coming over the hill. Yes, you feel okay, but the car ripping over the hill
They don't.
doesn't see you as easily. So, I mean, that's part of the challenge.
I'll buy you a 6-pack and hang out of my house.
So I have a question.
My wife said a FedEx truck at that.
The speed limit
Really?
Oh, yeah.
coming up middle is 25, if I remember correctly, from the city toward Greenleaf. It changes at state.
South Street.
Why?
I think either Middle or South Street, yeah, it's South Street. it
In
changes
South Street,
to
I think
30,
it
Yeah,
changes, right?
30.
Back to 30. Why not just leave it at 25 all the way?
It's illegal.
Because, yeah,
You can describe that.
yeah, by state law, 30 is the minimum. Unless we do a traffic study that shows that people are actually doing lower than that, and 25 is more appropriate, then 25 can be lower. That's how we were able to lower out Middle Street, because people actually were driving slower up on that section, the same that Islington, they're driving slower.
Goes back to what Eric said at the beginning of his presentation about the 85th percentile. So that's what really is used to dictate how the speed limits should be. So it goes in the factors. So you can't just artificially lower the speed limit and make that bad as somebody just not going that speed. All it does is nothing that.
Okay.
In the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I really appreciate you guys doing this. This is really very, we're really lucky that you're doing this. And I think everybody appreciates it, but through this process, if you do end up, it sounds like you have to shut down the road no matter what to one way while you're doing construction.
Yeah, so no matter what, like, imagine you got the sidewalk that's now, in this scenario, it's gonna be just, 2 feet on the other side of the curb. In order to construct that, all the equipment necessary is gonna take up a lane of traffic. So at the very least, this would be a one-way. I don't see how we could do alternating traffic in a scenario where you've got busy traffic coming down Lafayette. You're not gonna stop that traffic to get cars, so.
When you do that, if you could continue this process of communicating with us as far as what kind of traffic calming you'll have for people turning around to Hillside Drive. Because one thing you can't go back on is if anybody gets hit and
Right.
they do feel like the kids feel safe in that road, and that's not something that's gonna change. So.
So during construction, Barbara would make it inbound only. So that way that you wouldn't, if people are coming in that direction, they either going to Hillside or they're going up.
And they won't even get on.
Yeah, so we will have to limit the traffic. We'd have to work with fire and police temporarily to limit traffic going on.
And
How long anticipated?
that's it in there, a few weeks.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
Outside.
Outside,
A couple weeks to a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's on the contractor.
And just also piggyback about your, what you talked about with communication, that's why it's important to sign in, because if we can get people's email, and phone numbers, then it's a lot easier for us to communicate than to try to go knocking door to door. So we send out email blasts, for most of our projects, and that's how we try to get information direct to the people that want it, is through, communication lines that we get from the sign-in sheet. We'll put updates on the website, but a lot of time people don't go there once a week to go, look, I know it's not the most thrilling read to go to the city website. But that's where a lot of our information is, but. And
I want to go back to something that you said. You said that because you don't hear consensus. So are you taking alternative two off the plate?
In the sense that it's not, we continue the discussion, we just would not incorporate it into the sidewalk project, it would have to be a separate project.
So the trees would go,
Yes. That is the result of that.
the trees, the 100-year-old trees would go.
Can the arborist speak to what kind of life expectancy those trees have?
Is Matt still
left?
here?
He's still here.
Yeah.
So they are in an urban environment, right? You have permeable surfaces, rough soils. They are in good condition. They have some defects, but nothing that would prompt me to want to remove them sooner than what this project would bring. So at this point, I consider them totally fine urban trees. Was your question about the lifespan of what's remaining?
How much longer could one expect for those trees to be healthy and thrive?
I'd probably say, so the red maples, I would say they probably have at least another 30 years, assuming that there aren't any significant storms that cause additional damage. If the sidewalk goes in, Mark, I know that that sidewalk width is literally taking up that entire right of way for the most part. Those trees exist in that right of way. So even if that sidewalk surface was scooched more closer to the road and it was a smaller dimension of sidewalk, you're still causing incredible amounts of root damage. That would in turn cause the tree to be less stable in the ground, could cause failure. And even if we didn't get into those more structural roots, any of those finer absorption roots that take up water nutrients, that would impact the tree's health. That would probably prompt us to remove them in a couple of years after the project is complete. So,
Which street?
so I don't have the exact address, but it's the red maples. If you're going up Greenleaf, they're all on the left side there.
These ones right here.
So right where that shutdown is, that would be.
Four.
And then further down.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, there are 4 on that section right there where the red is, and then there is a private, I believe it is another red maple in the private property between the 2 hillside drives.
yeah, and that's part of the impact of second section. There would need to be a tree that's a private tree. So we'd have to be removed, so we'd have to get approval from that property owner in order to get it. And that's in that lower section, that's the optional adult one.
And I certainly would want to preserve as many trees as we could, but always I'm going to err on human safety over the trees, knowing we can replant and rejuvenate those trees and generations beyond the 30 years can enjoy them. That might be a cost of doing the project if the street's not altered.
Would you plant new trees in that green space between the sidewalk, like smaller trees?
I don't think there's gonna be enough room. Typically, when we do that, we are also, and Max can speak to this in other areas. We're trying to pick trees for those scenarios that are appropriate. We look up to make sure is there power lines. So let's pick a tree that's not gonna grow, 60 feet up in the air. Are they lower growth, smaller root ball type trees? Then those, we'd have to look at it on a case by case basis pretty much. Problem is when you've got a scenario where you've got a road and all the base materials there compacted, and you've got a sidewalk on the other side, super compacted base materials. Sometimes it's gonna be very difficult for a tree to thrive in that space between.
And any trees there would block your sight line as you're trying to look up that road.
So what it's worth in that immediate area, at least for me, if we did not go with alternative 2, there's no trees going back on city property. There's just no space anywhere for that. So unless a resident would want additional trees, we have something called a tree grant where we essentially as a city go and establish a tree for 2 years, but then it becomes a part of private property and we no longer maintain it. So that is an option, but at least as far as something that we will maintain in perpetuity as a city, that those trees won't exist in that space.
Just one quick comment. No one expected the ABC pathway to be blocked off. If real estate changes where the path is, where the kids are going, crossing the street, I think we need to anticipate that there's gonna be a lot more pedestrian traffic going up Greenleaf, crossing Lafayette and coming down to the high school. And I don't know if the city can take property under eminent domain and make that a permanent path to the safer crosswalk at Andrew Jarvis, but I'm looking at the whole picture. That could happen. Real estate could happen, change, and I'll say, you can't cut through here anymore. And the kids have to go up to the next intersection. Just something to look at.
That's a really good point.
I got a question. So with the sidewalk going up and then like if that pathway gets closed and the kids aren't able to go to the high school that way, they're gonna be walking up the sidewalk, doing a 180 back to Lafayette and crossing there. But that being our only left turn area, we're kind of just like vocalizing. I feel a lot of potential to have like a weird left turn with kids crossing, lots of cars moving. And I feel like if we're trying to get away from that intersection, we're kind of funneling more kids to that intersection to cross, to have a left turn that's blind. Like, I just feel like if we're pushing a one-way down, like we're kind of putting all of our eggs in that basket to turn all of it there.
Good point.
Which to me just feels like we're kind of leaving this main problem that we're trying to address in place. Or just exchanging one dump for another one.
Yeah, good point.
So, yeah, but most of the traffic, if you wanna go to downtown, you're gonna go up to Lafayette and make the left, right? But how many times do you come up and make that left into?
But if that's our only way, if that becomes a one-way down, that's the only way we would be able to come down, correct?
No,
You can come, make that right off the bypass.
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be two-way beneath those red blocks.
So.
Yeah.
You come on the
That
bypass.
what is
it's
that
right
left, that left arrow is,
That's the traffic coming up off the bypass, and they would not be able to go past this point. They'd have to turn left on the hillside.
Two ways though.
But yeah,
This is two-way,
these are both two-way streets here.
two-way, and we'd have signage
yeah,
here that
this is
says,
that one arrow makes. it look-
do not enter.
Yeah.
You know,
It's the lower hillside, it's just an arrow going down.
That's two ways. As we
That's two ways.
have the project right now, is that the easements, and the bid project are being put together for the upper part of the sidewalk, beginning of the timeline you showed. And they're also looking at what those further, more developed easements would take, private property, private removal, things like that, that they may make more difficult, push us out of budget potentially, or just longer timeline for that.
We might do that as a separate project in a separate calendar year, the base bid, the main sidewalk is going.
So you bid them at the same time, then once you get your price, you say, well, we'll award this portion, because we can afford it. But
Okay.
it doesn't mean the other ones can't be done, then we go to council, ask for appropriation or something. So we do that, so if under the same contract, it could, it depends on the timing.
We would set the contract up so we can award it either like that or.
Okay, so the follow-up question is for resolving traffic flow here. Right now, that's an ongoing issue, as you said, over 20 years of trying to figure it out, but right now, that's not it's to keep Greenleaf as it is, as a two-way in both directions, build the sidewalk. Hopefully that affects some calming to the traffic on its own, because the curb is more than just a bollard. And that when do you see having to try and take on, because it sounds, if I heard it from the arborist too, it's like, we don't want to lose 4 trees, but we gotta lose 4 trees for the sidewalk, and if we build the sidewalk even as a one-way, the trees are we're gonna shorten, they're gonna have to come out in a couple of years. So it sounds like we're.
Sorry, so, you didn't say. I think the point that I was trying to make was that if we went forward, with building the sidewalk in the space that those trees currently exist, that's when the trees will have to be removed. I believe in alternative 2, those sidewalks can be made in the road surface where it currently exists on that I'm gonna butcher, but the left side, if you're going up toward Lafayette, that left portion of the road. There's no roots really in that soil because that soil is so compacted and so manufactured to support the weight of vehicles. Roots aren't gonna wanna exist in there because the pore space is collapsed, there's no water, there's no nutrients. If you construct a sidewalk where there currently is a road, I see very little impact to the trees.
That makes sense. So then the decision on the road, is. I see the opportunities, but we know from doing our survey and stuff, I understand people, things are gonna evolve as we learn more on that. We've got 86% of the residents saying we'd like to keep it as a two-way access. Is the intersection and the road something that we are gonna take on at the same time, when we sort of the as is the overwhelming preference?
I think that you just pretty much said what if we left to our druthers and we didn't have to worry about anybody, we would probably approach it this way. That in terms of, how we would solve these things, but knowing that that you all are the residents that are consuming this action all the time. I drive this way, but I live over on South Street, so it doesn't matter to me as much. But we don't make these decisions lightly. We like to have, a clear consensus that there's a agreement. And frankly, we would imagine that over time, we would continue this dialogue. At some point in the future, we'd come back and, probably try something out. The reason it's been looked at for so long is because there is no simple solution. We were hoping when we got the traffic signal put in down in Jarvis, that would give people a better feeling about, using the lower section off the bypass. It has, the volume of traffic has changed completely. And I don't use that section of Greenleaf really anymore, just because, why? We have a signalized intersection, it's much safer.
But we're still seeing traffic coming out of the high school, making a right turn and then a left down Greenleaf. Old habits die hard.
Yes. Yeah, that 2,400 number was a little bit shocking, to see how many people are slowing down the road. And you feel it, but you don't know what the volume.
34%, there are 64%.
Yeah.
Just to note on the neighborhood stats as well, those, which was great that the questionnaire was put out. The questionnaire wasn't specifically about these two options though. So like that 86% wasn't taken from after you guys explaining these two options.
Well, what we could do is, you guys will now have this information. If the neighborhood wants to redo the survey, we can take that information. We're gonna be going to traffic, parking safety, with this information. We're gonna go to tree and greenery. So the project is, we still have to get easements and things, so there's some time still to get input.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of people that have families and stuff that aren't here tonight because they have families. It was the first day of school.
Yeah.
So trees is September 11th, and that's the tree meeting.
Yeah.
And that's when these will be discussed.
Yes.
Well, they aren't posted though, Max, are they?
No, so they'll be posted 1 week prior to the meeting itself, there's all the information next day into the meeting. Right.
As part of that, are we gonna talk about that one tree on private property?
We typically do not discuss
have to be
private tree removals
for
that one. Yes, that would be a separate matter.
For that lower section.
Correct.
What if they say no? Like, can they say no?
Private property.
Then what happens?
Yeah, right. Then we come back.
Said no, and these are our options.
Okay.
You have a lot of authority.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment about the survey results that were done in our neighborhood. 97% of households responded to the survey. While the survey did not have tonight's total information in there, one of the questions was, do you want Hillside Drive to continue to have vehicular access on Greenleaf in both directions to the bypass and to town? 86% of those residents said yes. So for what that's worth, for that snapshot in time, it was 86%.
But from the city's perspective too, this is that opportunity to discuss it, right? If it's not discussed, it's in this long term thing, But we don't just say, you're gonna get this, that's the whole point of this whole process, so I think. Unless there was a clear consensus, it's.
I have a hypothetical question. As I understand it, we have the trees, Portsmouth property, and one of the trees is private. Is that correct?
I believe there's 4 up here,
Yes.
and then there's one. On private property on the second.
So there's four,
There's
four city trees and one private tree that doesn't go to Trees and Greenery because it's a private tree. We get permission from the landowner, and if they don't grant permission, they don't grant permission.
What's the impact on the sidewalk?
For the lower section, if they don't grant permission,
Yeah.
it doesn't develop.
Oh, so there are no private trees on the upper section,
No,
only the lower section?
yes.
But there's a bunch of rock walls and things like that would have to be relocated and something to make the grades to part of it as well, so there's.
Don't forget.
Well, thank you again for coming out tonight and giving us feedback. We've been checking, is there any questions online?
Please make sure you find this.
Yeah.